I don't have time to build client acquisition systems now. I can start 3 months from now when I'm less busy. I sometimes hear that from B2B consultants who depend on referrals. And this is a trap, my friend. This is no different than saying, oh, I'm too busy now, when it's all about starting to eat healthy and working out. And in this video, I'm going to exactly lay out why it's a trap to be all mañana about building client acquisition systems, how much money you're losing out when you delay your start of building client acquisition systems by only 3 months, how you should go about the challenge of finding the time to build those systems, and what is the one only good reason to actually delay building client acquisition systems. So stick around. Okay, let's get into it. But before we start, we just have to make one premise, and that is I assume that your goal is to grow your B2B service business, your consulting business, your agency to 7 figures, and that you don't want to keep lingering around the $5,000 to $20,000 a month mark, right? I presume that you want to grow. If not, then there's no need to watch this video. Second point, when I say client acquisition systems, what do I mean? Those are sets of processes that book you sales calls with prospective clients in a predictable way. And for us B2B service providers, 99% of those processes will be something in the area of cold outreach, so that's cold email, cold DMing on LinkedIn, and content, YouTube videos, and posting on LinkedIn or Twitter. It could also be ads and webinars, but that's advanced. Most importantly, it is not about networking and going to conferences and upselling existing clients and so on. The key thing about a client acquisition system is that it can be outsourced. At least a big part of it, 80–90% of it, should be outsourceable. With something like networking or going to conferences and so on, there it needs to still be you, one of the owners of the company, or at least a very high-ranking employee, which if you are at 10 to 20K a month, you will not have that. It's going to be just you. So do not include networking as part of your client acquisition process. This is something that can be the cherry on top or the icing on the cake, but not the main cake. The main cake should be client acquisition systems that you can partially outsource to, let's say, virtual assistants. And the third introductory point I wanted to make is, well, when you're a B2B consultant, why even should you consider building client acquisition systems? You could be thinking, well, I mean, business is going decently well. Sure, sometimes there's an up month, sometimes there's a down month, but overall it's heading up, and clients are happy with what I'm doing, and I'm sort of growing slowly. So why should I bother with outreach and putting out more than, let's say, 1 LinkedIn post a week that I can put together in half an hour? Here are 3 reasons why you should want to systematize your outreach. First of all, how do you plan to grow? How do you plan to take charge of your growth? Do you really want to just be dependent on the goodwill of other people, of referrals, of existing clients upselling and staying with you? It's not a very durable approach, right? It's also quite passive, right? You just simply expect that the world will deliver to you. And that's fine if you don't have many growth ambitions. But as we established in the beginning, you want to grow that business to 7 figures. So I think not having any systems that can get you there a bit more predictably, a bit of an omission. Point number 2 here is having these systems in place is an insurance against lean times. When a recession hits and half of your clients cancel the engagement, what are you going to do? You'll be far more resilient because with systems, you can find new clients easily. And the third and probably most important reason why you should want to have some kind of client acquisition systems in place is because you can scale much better. Because look, when you are depending on referrals, then you basically most of the times will just take any deal that comes your way. You will not be able to specialize. When, however, you can just reach out to the world and you know that if you do a certain amount of work, you will get more clients, at least more prospects to book sales calls with you. You can specialize. You can decide who you're going to be working with. First, you can bias your client selection based on how much they can afford to pay you. So that means more money. Also, you can bias your client selection towards those that occupy a certain niche or a specific use case. And you can specialize in that and become a world expert in one narrow thing, which then leads to a virtuous cycle because you will then be much better in converting new prospects in that niche. And finally, you'll then be able to build standard operating procedures, SOPs, in this sub-niche, which means that you can more easily outsource that work, which again furthers your growth. So it's purely a virtuous cycle when you have more potential clients that you can handle and you can pick and choose from among them. Okay, with that said, back to the I don't have time objection. So Alex Hormozi has a standard response when people want to delay getting started. And he says something along the lines of, it's actually really great to start when you are super busy because you don't want to drop the ball when you get busy again in the future. And the best way to ensure that you will not drop the ball in the future is to start when you actually have no time. So you should actually start now. However, in my experience, this line of reasoning only gets people's intellectual buy-in, but not a visceral one. They say, oh yeah, well, that's a good point. Okay, but still, I'm going to delay. What I believe works much better in the B2B services space is to truly take this objection seriously and break it down into its constituent parts and really show step by step why it is such a bad choice. And that's what I'm going to be doing now. I want you to understand intellectually, but also viscerally, why you're shooting yourself in the foot when you are delaying the building of client acquisition systems. And for this, we have to go a bit more in depth. So as a first line of reasoning, we have to mention the topic of time management. You need about 10 hours a week as a minimum to start building serious client acquisition systems. And if you say you do not have those 10 hours a week, then I'm going to challenge you on it. First of all, since we determined that you want to build a 7-figure business, I assume that you're working 60 hours a week, right? I mean, if you don't, you will not achieve that. I know people will object this, but it's simply true. But I'm not going to argue this. It's just a fact. So at least 60 hours. I think if you actually don't have a family, you should be working 80 hours. And when people tell me that they cannot afford to spend 10 hours a week to build client acquisition systems, then I wonder, really? Are you saying that you're so efficient in how you work, that your 60 hours are so packed with impactful activities that 10 hours are impossible to squeeze out? Is that right? You're planning out your quarters, your weeks, your months, your days in advance. You are time blocking, you are batching tasks. You're not checking your inbox 30 times a day. And you're optimizing your food intake for minimum time loss and maximum release of energy throughout the day. Really, you're doing that. Well, I know I'm not. And so that's why I actually recently signed up with a productivity coach. We will dial all this stuff in. And I realized that I definitely can squeeze out another 10, 15, maybe even 20 more productive hours out of the week. And it's going to make a huge difference. And I would be willing to bet that just by reorganizing your calendar and establishing good productivity principles in your daily routine, you can squeeze out another 10, 15, maybe even 20 hours out of your week. So that's the first point, and it's usually not really the real argument. It's a bit of a fake argument, and I'm not blaming you. It does not really come from not having the time. It comes from not seeing the building of client acquisition systems as a priority. Why should you make time for something that has an uncertain outcome, could actually completely fail, and that you could sink dozens and maybe even hundreds of hours into? I totally get it. But you need to become convinced that this is actually something you need to do in order to hit your goals. And so once we've discussed time management, the second point is that we truly need to understand how important it is to have some form of client acquisition systems. And why? It's because you need to start working on the business. When it's just you, a solo consultant, then you effectively are selling your time. And when you start working on the business, you create a system that somebody else could run. That is the first step of working on the business and not in the business. You're introducing a form of leverage. And I'm sure you know, but leverage, let's quickly recap. What is leverage? Leverage is a way to make your hour worth more. You can do that through one of 5 ways, or several at the same time. That is people, capital, software, media, and skills. Jeff Bezos has all of those 5, right? He has incredible skills. He has people that he's hired. He has software. He has media. He's a well-known figure around the world. And of course, he has a lot of capital. If you look at, for example, somebody more humble, let's say a call center operator, this person has achieved leverage by just hiring a lot of people. A digital nomad who's sitting on a beach in Thailand and has a little software product, like an app that throws off $10,000, $20,000 a month. This person has leveraged software. A YouTuber has leveraged media, right? And the world's best chef has leveraged skills. And what you need to understand is that as a B2B service provider, you're effectively selling your time. And I know that you probably charge per project or you have a monthly retainer, but effectively that still means that you're charging per hour. It varies. Maybe one client is worth a little bit more, but effectively it's a per hour charge. And the thing is, if you just keep doing what you're doing and you keep working only in the business, not on the business, you will stay at your current level. Maybe over the course of a lifetime, you can increase your hourly rate by 50%, maybe even double it. You know, it's perfectly possible, but it's quite slow. You will never be able to just working on your skills. Very unlikely that I'm not going to say never, but very unlikely that you will be able to 10x that. You will truly need to become one of the top 0.01% in order to do that. Skills are a very difficult place to leverage. Like the more up you get in the skills pyramid, the tougher competition gets. So ideally, you would not just keep it to your skills, you'd add another element of leverage, and that is preferably in the area of software and people. The only way to grow faster is by putting systems in place where you can delegate or automate specific tasks. And ideally, you would start with those tasks that fill your calendar with sales calls. You could make the case that you would want to hire people to deliver, but if you do that before you have some kind of client acquisition system in place, it is quite tricky and quite risky, because now you have somebody on your payroll, and what if referrals dry up for some reason? You just have somebody, you then suddenly have some fixed costs that you need to meet, and you don't have a predictable way of feeding them. So the best way to do this is to actually first build version 1 of your client acquisition systems, turn them up a bit, get so many clients that you're struggling to deliver to them, then hire somebody to help you with delivery. Once that's consolidated, you then again turn up the heat a little bit more on the client acquisition side, see if you can integrate that, but you always have to start with the demand side of things and not with supply. You first turn up demand. It's much better to be overwhelmed by too much work than having too high costs, people that you need to feed and not having a predictable way of getting clients. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, so at this point, we've come a long way. We've established that you want to grow the business, you understand what client acquisition systems entail, and you understand that this kind of step by step way is the way to grow to 7 figures. Now, so let's get into the question whether you should wait until you're less busy to get started. And I'm not just going to give you the Hormozy line of, well, you want to start when you're busy so that when you get busy again, you don't drop the ball. I get it, but let's also make it very clear what are the consequences of this action. How much money do you actually forego by doing this? So let me ask you, and let's do this little exercise here. Let's just assume that you're making $100,000 a year now. And let's assume also that if you keep things as they are, you're going to be growing 10% year on year. But if you build client acquisition systems, you're going to make a jump by 70% in the first year, and then let's say 50% in the second year, and then it sort of tapers off over the following years back to 10% again. And those are absolutely not unrealistic numbers. I think they are actually quite conservative. We've had a 65% jump and we've nowhere near maxed out our client acquisition system. So that kind of growth is going to continue for us. We're not even assuming a doubling of the business at any point. Okay, with these premises accepted, let's look at a 10-year time horizon. If you only assume for the next 10 years, how much money are you missing out on if you delay your start of building client acquisition systems by only 3 months? What's your guess? Put it in the comments. Well, let's take a look, shall we? I did this math exercise in a spreadsheet. So let's take a look at it. I ran the math in a spreadsheet. So here, this is where we are now at Q1 2024. So as we said, let's assume the baseline is 100,000 a year, which means 25,000 per quarter. And we're growing 2.5% quarter on quarter, which compounds to around 10% a year, right? So this is what we will have in total cumulative revenues over the course of 10 years. So 1.7 million. Okay. And you're growing quite nicely. You're at least beating inflation, so if this covers your life expenses, then that's perfect. Okay. Let's look at scenario 2. Having client acquisition systems. Now let's build them. And we assume that doing that, you will get in the first year, you would get 71% of growth and 65%, which from this baseline of 100,000 is pretty okay. Realistic, is reasonably conservative, is not too high. I'm not even assuming a doubling of the business. So 71% growth. Next year, you grow by 65%. And then it sort of tapers off down to the 10% territory in the second half of that decade. You'd be making 6.2 million in cumulative revenues if you follow this path. Okay. So, and here's the thing. How much now do you think is if you just delay this growth by 1 quarter? So we take out this 15% of this quarter and we just shift all that growth by 1 quarter to the right. How much do you think you're going to missing out on? Well, the actual number is almost 250,000. I wouldn't have expected that either, right? So all I did is here to shift these numbers. I shifted these numbers 1 quarter further and you're missing out on 250,000. Now you may say that over the lifetime is, 5.9 million versus 6.2 million. What do I care? Right now you're making 100,000 and this is 250,000 in additional revenue. And this is how much you are delaying it by. And are you truly only delaying it by 3 months? Will you actually start 3 months from now? Will you not delay it by another 3 months? And God knows when you're going to start. This is how much this is costing you, 250,000. So after that sobering insight, there's one reason where I agree that it makes sense to delay building client acquisition systems. Aside from genuine personal life emergencies, I'm going to let you define what these are for you. But outside of that, there's only one good business reason to delay. And that is if you're making significantly less than $100 per hour. I always use this figure as a yardstick where any kind of B2B consultant, solopreneur who is selling his time effectively should at least achieve $100 per hour as a minimum. That way, when you work 40 hours a week and all of them are billable, you are sort of maxing out at $20,000 a month, roughly. You will not always hit those 40 billable hours, but that is sort of when you're just working on your own and you depend on referrals, that is pretty much where you are maxing out. I have met very few consultants who make more than that. Now, if you make significantly less than $100 $100 per hour, let's say you're around the $50 per hour mark, then indeed I recommend that your main focus and your only focus should be on getting that number up, either by becoming better and faster at what you do so that your work becomes more valuable, or sell a different service. Perfect example. Most copywriters and most designers, even web designers, charge on average, effectively, they end up at some $50 per hour, especially if you take Upwork as a yardstick. But if you look at people who design well-converting landing pages, they make significantly more than that. So if you change what you do from doing design work, just doing web design, and moving to guaranteeing some form of outcome when it comes to converting landing pages, that's when you can upgrade your skills into a more valuable service. And that, of course, will take you a while to get there. This transition to upgrade your skills takes effort. And during that time, indeed, I recommend that you do not spend time building client acquisition systems. You just do whatever you can, do networking, approach people manually. That's fine. But don't distract yourself with building complex client acquisition systems. That can come later. First, get the value of your hour to $100 at least. But there's also an exception to the exception. If you are making, let's say, $50 an hour, and you have a way that you can very efficiently and scalably get people who deliver that work for $15, $20 an hour, right? You want to achieve at least 50% gross margin. So at the maximum, you should get somebody who is charging you 25 to deliver. But if you can do that, and if you don't need a huge amount of oversight over them, in that case, you should still focus on building client acquisition systems. That is sort of an exception of the exception. In most areas of B2B services, this is not going to be possible. You ideally want to increase the value of what you do. It's a better leverage point, but who knows, maybe you found some niche where you can get really cheap labor to deliver good work and you have systems in place to make that delivery efficient.